Continuing on the Hubbard Scientology series, I expected this book to be a more technical and quite devoid of theory, but I was wrong. It actually contains a few new concepts about human behavior, 2 major changes, close to 3 if you get very technical with it, and these modifications to the philosophy merit discussion because they change core tenets of the system, making me wonder how it can still stand without further elaboration, how it can survive so many reversals in philosophical positions. So I'll present the basics like I always do and the particulars of how this religion keeps morphing and developing. So stay tuned. Welcome to biblioCultist, where I review books that I find interesting in the topics of religion, philosophy, history, and fiction. Please remember to subscribe to the channel, click the bell for notifications, like the video, share the video, comment on the video. I will put right here below my X account where you can communicate with me directly if you wish, my Ko-Fi account where you can donate and check out the merch store. And doing all of these things really helps the channel to keep growing. I am very happy with the organic development of the channel, and I really appreciate all of you that watch these videos and find what I do interesting. Again, I really appreciate it. In this episode, I'm going over Advanced Procedure and Axioms by L. Ron Hubbard, and this is by Bridge Publications 2007. Now, the book that I have cost me 50 cents. So a lot of these books, you can find them cheap. Online, out there, you can find them. I know that in official channels, they can cost you a lot of money, but really, if you look well, you can find them for a very low price. So this one, the quality is spectacular. I love their quality. It really is. Bridge Publications really makes good quality books, good quality covers, the artwork. It's actually very pleasant to read these books. So find whichever one you can, but you can definitely find good quality for not a lot of money. Let me discuss his first major philosophical introduction into the system, which is something he tends to do. Every book, he seems to just add another perspective, another concept. He also tends to change things. So I'll go over the changes a little bit later. But first, a new philosophical conception. And in this book, it's all about self-determinism. It is not just the notion of free will, very standard stuff that you find in most religions, but here it goes into a metaphysical claim that all that occurs to us is basically an effect of our own determinations. It reminded me a bit of karma in the traditional way, but it implies that you must assume full responsibility even for engrams and our attitudes towards reality itself. So basically it's a form of solipsism in the sense that it is really our consciousness that's really making everything that happens to us happen. That doesn't mean that the whole universe is inside your brain per se, but that your brain influences the entire universe. In the traditional karmic idea, it is all your past lives that keep developing merits and demerits, and those are the things that affect your current life. So yes, you are basically responsible for your current condition in the traditional karmic view. But there's a slight difference here, a slight modification of the idea here. And as I mentioned before, Hubbard already suggested that he believes in reincarnation. He kind of repeats that here. But this little twist here is different because there's a distinction to be made between responsibility and culpability. And a lot of people, especially in psychological circles, tend to mix these two up. And they're not the same. One presupposes an ethical standard, the other one is just a causation statement. Now for Hubbard, reality is relative and is imposed on by our own decisions and perceptions. He combines this then with another concept that he calls postulates, in which all major realities or circumstances in our lives are contingent on statements or affirmations of belief that we make to ourselves at certain points in our lives. So we make a declaration, we believe something, we affirm something, and that postulate influences the rest of our lives. It creates reality, basically. With this, he continues the elaboration of his subjective notion of reality, but he takes the social contract further and has now become a cosmic contract in a way. So reality is what we affirm it's reality. It's about agreement, but now it affects the entire cosmos. I mean, like I've said before, liberalism is quite extreme in arguing that nature is not as important as our decisions, our reality. We can shape reality, but this takes it to a whole new level. Throughout the series, Hubbard has been consistent in his belief that those that are subject to the environment are weak and closer to death, whereas a true new man, which he now calls the Homo Novus, to contrast him with Homo sapiens, is a god in the flesh when he is in control of MEST, matter, energy, space, and time. So that's how you become a new man, an Übermensch. Like I've mentioned before, there's a Nietzschean aspect to his philosophy. Might is right, social Darwinism, all that is there, but it has this twist in it that is not quite New Age, but it starts to envelop itself in this view. As I've said before, when you read his first books like Dianetics, you see a more traditional 1950s feel to the book. It is very old school, conservative. As it keeps morphing, it starts sounding a lot more like a New Age book. And obviously it has to do with relativism. Let me go through a quick quote to exemplify my point. The mystic for millennia has been talking about faith. He never built a bridge to it. He made a terrible fundamental error in converting faith to have faith. When he said have faith, he invited understanding, then confusion of understanding because one does not understand faith, one is faith. The source, content of, and contact with faith is you. So as you can see, he is arguing that faith in itself is your consciousness, whereas to have faith implies that there's something that must be had external to you. And because his obsession is about self-determinism, obviously he redefines faith to become something else. He critiques the very notion of obedience to the supreme being because of its implication of submitting to MEST. So because God is an objective reality from the perspective of the believer in God, and therefore God is the creator of the universe or is the universe itself, then obviously MEST would be either God or an agent of God. And since his theology is about breaking away from that and dominating MEST, then obeying God becomes a problem. So you must not obey God. Interestingly, that means that you must reject God or disobey God if you interpret God or you actually define God in the traditional sense. So if you notice, he has gone from putting God in that eighth dynamic, and now he is proposing a rebellion against God if it means in any way submitting to natural law. So now in this case, you could argue is left-hand path in that sense, in the sense that it is antinomian in a weird kind of backdoor way. Now that we've gone through the basic philosophical premise of the work, which is really just an expansion of what he's done before, but there's plenty of twists and turns there that change the philosophy into something else, I can go now into the changes, which I think are fascinating. And this has become quite expected for me now. Almost every book, I know there's going to be a change and there's going to be some kind of new discovery of some sort. And that's what makes the books actually interesting. And I can see why they sold so well, because they each have their own charm. So let me read a quote in this regard. In relatively skilled hands, it is a 25 to 50 hour process to advance a Homo sapiens to a Homo novus. This compares to a 200 to a 2,000 hour process of running engrams. The engrams do not need to be run, but become ineffective when the determinism to have them is cleared away. So see what happens there? He is arguing that first, it is a very quick process, which most people that engage in Scientology can tell you it's not that quick of a process. But fine, they can argue that each person is different, and that's why you have to spend thousands of dollars and years of your life to get high up and become a clear, whereas here, he's saying you could do it in a couple of days. But there's something more interesting to me, because that's more political. You could argue that you have independent Scientologists that don't charge that much money. So you can engage the system without having to go through the mainstream source for argument's sake. Or you can just engage his books and still get a lot of benefit. Point is that here he's arguing against the Engrams themselves, because now the Engrams don't need to be run, which was the entire point of the system. And he also is arguing that you can get rid of them if your determinism to have them is gone. So now there's an additional layer psychologically that implies that you only have the Engrams because you want to have the Engrams. That's where the responsibility component comes in. Another thing he does is he also changes one of the most core beliefs in Scientology, which is the Engram itself, which is what I just mentioned, which he now calls a heavy facsimile because of his discovery that they do not actually reside in the cells. So the entire premise of the Engrams in Dianetics and his other books was predicated on the notion that the Engram is in every cell and it's something unconscious that's there that affects you. But now he's changing the entire basics of the system, and that to me is fascinating. It's almost like the entire soteriology of Christianity would change from night to day. Like you read the Gospels, and then you read the letters, and the letters from Paul say the opposite of what the Gospels say. Things like this. It would be as dramatic. Another major change lies in an axiom, and the number of the axiom is 118 in this book. And he affirms that an organism cannot be aberrated unless it has agreed to that aberration. And that's a complete reversal of the original concept of the Engram, like I mentioned. The aberration was seen as a negative evolutionary hack of our language development. If you remember, and if you haven't, you can go to my Scientology playlist and you can see my first reviews. His argument was, it's not only in the cells, but these engrams are there because of language. We have been tricked by our evolution. Now we have language. The reactive mind is incapable of distinguishing between literal words and conceptual words, etc. And then we're knocked unconscious, and then all this language information comes in, and that's how we get the engram. But here he says that you are responsible and you want the aberration, and that the aberration cannot happen unless you want the aberration. This is a complete upside down world of that original concept. And just that fact to me is so fascinating, because if I'm in the system and you tell me the opposite, which one do I follow? Well, Hubbard himself has said in one of the previous books I reviewed that you should always follow the most recent book. So that means that the most recent book cancels the previous books, which means that this book cancels all the other books. So why would you start with the other books anyway? Why not start here? But of course, if you start here, you miss a lot of the development, and therefore you don't really understand even the terms. Or at least you can understand the terms, but you don't understand what has happened. So it's a very weird dynamic, because you have to go through a system that cancels itself out. It is a very entertaining journey, and that's why I'm doing this here in this channel, but it is still strange. Now, I must admit that I find these books entertaining, while also finding them constantly evolving as a religion and also very unstable philosophically. So it's kind of a weird situation for me, because I enjoy them. They're interesting to me as a study. There's plenty of good stuff in there. I mean, I really do believe that there's interesting stuff, but the problem is that a lot of the stuff that I found interesting at first is now canceled. He has denied them or reversed them. So then as you go reading, you never know what you should like or not like, because God knows what he's going to do. He's going to probably switch them again, reverse them, twist them, change them. And what I've noticed is every change leads you towards relativism, subjectivism, and kind of a reverse morality of what it first started as. So it's very difficult to take a system like that very seriously, because there's no consistent theological position to kind of utilize to be able to analyze and study the rest of the works. So like I said, very interesting. There are plenty of stuff in there that I still find to be useful, but I will have to just wait and see what will happen in the next books. And there's plenty of them out there. If you like what I'm doing here, if you enjoy these reviews, drop me a comment. It's difficult for me to gauge if these kinds of reviews are interesting. I can't help it myself. I love studying religions and studying kind of obscure texts. I kind of like this kind of exploration, kind of deep diving into a system and finding out the wrong turns and even the conundrums that develop as any system starts getting more and more complex, especially modern systems that don't have a good, solid philosophical foundation, as you can tell. So anyway, hopefully you enjoyed the review. Please remember to subscribe to the channel, click the bell for notifications, like the video, share the video, and comment on the video. Doing these things really helps and I appreciate it. Thank you for being with me. See you next time.